Thank you for tuning in to Preparing for Roma Next Generation and the CSBG Annual Report, an overview of Module 1, State Administration. Our presenters for Module 1 are Jeannie Chaffin, Director of the Office of Community Services, Jenae Bjelland, Executive Director of the National Association for State Community Services Programs, Barbara Mooney, Director of the Association of Nationally Certified Roma Trainers, and Kate Blunt of the Federal Consulting Group. Again, we'll be reviewing Module 1 on State Administration.
Hello, this is Jeannie, and I'm going to go over all the elements here very quickly that are included in the administration module. I think as folks are looking at this module, an important thing to remember is that it crosswalks significantly with the CSBG state plan. Many of the elements in this module are directly related to elements in the state plan, and many of these elements are not new. But let me just highlight that Section A collects information about the CSBG lead agency, who the authorized official is, and who the point of contact is. Most of that is in the state plan, but it can change between when states complete a state plan and when they complete the annual report. There's information in Section B about the statewide goals and accomplishments. Section C covers the eligible entity updates. There could be some changes in that section from when states submitted their state plan. Section D includes information about organizational standards for eligible entities, and more specifically, and we'll talk about this in a little bit greater detail in a moment, it is an opportunity for the state to report how the eligible entities did on organizational standards. Section E includes state use of funds. Section F is about state training and technical assistance. Section G is about state linkages and communication. Section I is an opportunity for the state to talk about the monitoring, corrective action, and fiscal controls for the year. And Section I is information about results-oriented management and accountability. So many of these sections are very similar to sections of the CSBG-IS that states are very familiar with reporting on. This section, this module of the annual report is completed by state CSBG administrators. There's very little information here that would be required to be reported by the eligible entities, if any, perhaps. All information is going to be based on a federal fiscal year, and that would be October through September. And the first report using Module 1 for the new CSBG annual report is envisioned to be March 31, 2017. This all includes information on state administration of CSBG funding, the use of state administrative funds and discretionary funds, and how funds were used for training and technical assistance, progress of eligible entities on the organizational standards, and how the state is meeting accountability measures related to state monitoring, training, and technical assistance, as well as some other critical areas. So on this chart, a really nice, quick little chart that shows you what is in Module 1 of State Administration and what is in the CSBG-IS survey.
I do want to add to this, Jeannie, because we want to give a visual on what's new and what has been consistent in our reporting. With the CSBG-IS survey, that is something that we've always built with the network's information with the Information Systems Task Force. And usually when we talked about updating the IS, we focused more on what the local agencies were reporting and the family indicators, outcomes, and community. So this is the first time that we've really taken a very strong look at what the states would be reporting on and contextualize that in the performance management framework. That we wanted to ensure that when we look at the Roma cycle as a whole, that that affects the state as well, and that you start with the state plan, and then you have the report, which is this annual report. So you have these new sections, the organizational standards for eligible entities, the state linkages and communications, monitoring, and Roma. This is something that the states had always been talked about in their state plan when we had processes, or standards is quite new for us. And we wanted to ensure that as you say what you're going to do in your plan, we offered space in this CSBG annual report for you then to report on everything. So we're excited to see how this is all being put together and that the network has been able to let us know what should be here and also how we can frame the whole conversation. Next, we're going to move to the ACSI, and Kate's going to present on that.
Okay, one of the new sections in Module 1 has to do with the ACSI, which is the American Customer Satisfaction Index, which OCS has been involved with in the last couple of years. And this is part of Section B, which has to do with statewide goals and accomplishments. And it, too, follows from what the states will report in their model state plans. In fact, it's information that, to some extent, is repetitious. So one thing you'll be asked is, what was the most recent American Customer Satisfaction Index survey result? In many respects, this will be the same thing you reported in your state plan, unless you're on a 2-year report, at which point this might be the first place where you put it in. There is an IM that gives more information about, it's IM 150, about how to set targets, because that's the other thing that's requested in the annual report, is to set a target based on what your current score was. So I would urge you to look at IM 150. It gives quite a few good details about that. The other critical part of this section, besides giving us the scores, giving OCS the scores, is to provide information about the feedback and the involvement with the eligible entities. Did you let the eligible entities know about the ACSI, what you heard, what changes you're making, what actions you're taking, and their involvement in that? So there's that section B3, which covers that. So just a little background in terms of the ACSI. You've probably heard some of this already, but just to put it into a context, OCS back last year in the fall of 2015 conducted 2 surveys. One was of the state lead agencies, which basically asked the states about the services that were provided by OCS in line with the new federal accountability measures. And OCS has taken that data and has been making improvements in their service delivery. At about the same time, OCS surveyed the eligible entities in terms of how the state agencies are providing service in line with the state accountability measures on that survey. Those surveys were both completed over a couple of months' time, and the states received their specific state reports in February of 2016. And those reports gave them scores on each of the areas that were surveyed, like involvement of the eligible entities in the development of plan, like training and technical assistance, like linkages and communication. And they got their overall scores, as well as all the comments that were received. So each state got its own state report. This lays out a timeline for when the surveys would be occurring, when the states would be getting results, and therefore how they could use these both in their state plans and in their annual reports. The next survey of eligible entities we anticipate being early next year. The survey of states won't be until later. So in terms of the annual report, this is a piece that will be due March 31st, 2017. So you'll basically be reporting on data that you've already received, and you will be reporting on feedback that you gave to the eligible entities, and how you considered the feedback that you got from the surveys. Next year's overall satisfaction of the eligible entities in the state, again, you'll be giving a target, and you should look at IM 150 to do that. I've already mentioned that those of you that have a 2-year state annual report or state plan will be first reporting on your scores and your targets in this upcoming annual report, because you won't have submitted it in your state plan. Those of you that gave information on the state plan back in September, you'll basically be repeating the same information. Just to summarize, the use of the ACSI, the prime focus is to, is integral to the implementation of both the state accountability measures as specified in the master state plan or the model state plan, and the implementation of the federal accountability measures. So they go hand in hand, and they're very specific. The ACSI asks very specific questions about each of the accountability measures. And the intent is really to give you good feedback on what, good feedback to OCS and the states on what we are doing well in terms of those accountability measures, what improvements we could make, and then being able to track over time how the changes we've made, the actions we've taken do in fact improve our scores and improve service delivery.
Now we're going to talk about success stories. This is what we have traditionally had in Section D of the CSBG IS report. We found that we wanted to be able to have this report have a mixture of data elements and narratives, and that as a network that is so diverse, such as the Community Services Block Grant Network, where we have 56 state grantees, we have over 1,000 local agencies, we wanted an area where we could talk about the strengths that we have at the state and local areas. So the first question is the state management accomplishments. So this is where we ask you to describe your top management accomplishments for improvements in efficiency, accountability, or quality services and strategies. We've had many states handle this question in different ways. Some states send this out to their local agencies and ask the local agencies what they saw as their state management strengths, while others have also answered this question themselves. Now we continue that on to, at the local agency level, what are 3 notable management accomplishments that the local agencies were able to implement for high quality, accessible, and well-managed services and strategies? And then finally, because CSBG is a block grant, because we do focus on what are the unique needs at the local agency level from your community needs assessment, we wanted to have an area for you to talk about any innovative and creative approaches that you're taking in your state, in your local agencies, to talk about how you're impacting the communities and individuals and families that you serve. Next, we move on to the organizational standards. So this will be the first time that we're reporting on the organizational standards. They've been implemented at the state and local level, and this is going to help us close the loop on what actually happened. So for the first row you see here, we talk about it's going to be auto-populated with the fiscal year and the state CSBG plan target. This is where we're making those connections between the state plan and the CSBG annual report. Then we're going to have the states enter in the number of entities assessed in their states, and then of that, how many met 100% of the state standards. We heard from the network in the multiple comment periods that we had that this was understood to be org standard measure, but that there was also a need to have additional information. So based upon that feedback, the report has been modified for this feedback process, and that we've added an area for you to be able to talk about the number of entities assessed and how many met between 90 and 99% of the standards, 80 and 89% of the standards, 70 and 79% of the standards. We don't have anything below 70% because we were really trying to figure out where everybody was at. And then on the next page, we went into a little bit more detail. Here we have it broken out for the organizational standards by category, that we know that there are so many different standards, and we wanted to know within each category, for example, organizational leadership, how many of the entities who were assessed on organizational leadership met all of the standards, and then what is that actual percentage. So this will give us better insight into the training and technical needs of our network and where we have our strengths and where we can have some improvements. Next, we're going to be discussing assessing Roma implementation, and we're going to have Barbara Mooney talk about this part. Barbara, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jenae. We're in Section I here, working with assessing Roma implementation. The states in their model state plan have identified some ways that they plan to provide Roma support and feedback regarding that. And so in this section, there are 4 questions where they're actually going to talk about what happened. And so in I.2, how did the state support the local CSBG eligible entities in using the Roma system? How did the state, for example, describe any data systems improvements or community needs assessment support and so on? And so there's a narrative that will be added in that section. in I.3, the state is describing their procedures and activities used to review the Roma data. Make note that this is all the data from the elements of the Roma cycle. So it would include the documentation that that eligible entities would have done in certain sections of the organizational standard relating to needs assessment and strategic planning and reporting of data and so on. So there are a lot of sections in the org standards that would include Roma data, and of course the national performance indicators would also be some Roma data as well. The idea is to look for completeness and accuracy of this data. So how is the state validating that the information that's submitted by the local agencies is complete and accurate? And then I.4 is about feedback, state feedback. According to the state and federal accountability measures, states are required to provide written and timely feedback to each eligible entity. And this is feedback regarding the performance of the entity in meeting the Roma goals as measured through national performance indicator data, or as I said, some of the pieces of the annual report or the organizational standards as well. So the states will say either they have not done that, but they plan to assure timely notification, or that yes, they have, and here's some information about how they've done that. And then the last piece here is I.5, where the state is going to provide examples. So similar to the success stories that Jenae just talked about, this would be some stories, examples of changes that were made by eligible entities that were based on the performance data that they have looked at. So what changes did they make to improve service delivery, to enhance the impact for the individuals, families, and communities that were based on their analysis of performance data. So these four pieces, the answers to these four questions are new in this report and are really a closure of the pieces that they've begun in their plan.
Thank you, Barbara. So hopefully this points out some of the areas that we think folks may have the most questions about, and it's also the areas that as states are preparing for new reporting that we suggest that they look at now, perhaps begin to gather your data and your information about these sections in anticipation of the March 30, 2017 reporting deadline. But in the meantime, we still are in the 30-day comment period, the last and final 30-day comment period for the proposed CSBG annual report. Folks should be working to submit their comments by the end of November so that they can be assured that OMB will be reviewing those comments before they make their final determination about this data collection form. This is one of 4 webinars that we are actually recording to highlight in a little bit more in depth about each module in the annual report. We hope that this answered some questions for folks about Module 1 and really encourage everyone to look at the module closely. And if you have any questions about any of the sections, please feel free to contact OCS or NASCSP with those questions. Thank you.